this morning. Free Civil Society Organizations, Center for Accountability and the Rule of Law, Institute for Governance Reform, and 50/50 Group have called for a review of the election laws to reduce the voting threshold from 11.9%, saying it is too high for women's representation and minor political parties ahead of the June 24th multi-tier election. So this morning, to discuss the call, we've been joined in the studio by the Executive Director for Center for Accountability and the Rule of Law, Barrister Ibrahim Tomi. Good morning and welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thank you very much. Always pleased to be here.
All right. We also look forward to receiving Fatoma Fanbunde, who is the Director of Legal Affairs at the Electoral Commission for Sierra Leone, to help us with the conversation. But Barrister Tomi, let's start off. First, there were concerns around the reintroduction of a PR system. And following those concerns, the ECSL then developed regulations. And out of those regulations, there came in a threshold of 11.9 to secure a seat in Parliament. And the idea behind the reintroduction of a proportional electoral system is to be more inclusive, get more people, more shades into Parliament. So, minority groups like the women and all of that will be able to get representation. But now you've reviewed that and you've thought this is not going to be possible. So first off, let's look at how did you arrive at that position where you feel that 11.9% will not give the representation that we are clamoring for?
Yes, first off, women are not a minority group. They are minority groups, but women are not part of that group.
Right.
But I couldn't have made the point better than you did, Samuel, in the sense that people will recall that I was one of the leading campaigners for the PR system.
Right.
Because the PR system promises many things, including the fact that it is more likely to be inclusive, minority interests to be represented, and there is, more importantly, it reduces the chances of wasting votes or ballots. So depending on the formula, let's put it that straight, there are many variants of the PR system. So we're hoping that, and this is the point that I've made in the last few weeks, especially after we discussed, we spent a lot of time, and rightly so, discussing the legality or otherwise of the PR system, and completely forgot about how to make it work for all of us and ensure that it delivers on the promise or promises that we've talked about. So now the electoral threshold of 11.9%, we have said is bad for inclusion in the sense that, we're talking about non-traditional parties getting represented in Parliament. It seems as though this is going to benefit only the two traditional major political parties, LSPP and APC. And the rumor out there, in fact, is that they were very much agreeable to this in Parliament. There was no objection. They are happy with that threshold. But we have thought long and hard about this, and we have now come to the conclusion that that threshold is going to make it very difficult, as we have said, for non-traditional parties to get represented, for minority interests to be represented, but even for the major parties, they think this is good for them. The traditional parties, it's bad for them as well. And this is why I say that we had hoped that at the end of the electoral process, we will have a parliament that has a national character. Because, by the way, the Constitution requires political parties to have a national character. And the political parties are going to produce an outcome that's not going to give us a national character in Parliament. It means it defeats the spirit of the PR system, but also, in some ways, in contravention of the text of the Constitution. Because what is going to happen is you will have APCs dominating, basically get most seats from the Northwest and SFP from the Southeast. We would have hoped that if you reduce the threshold, you would even have APC getting seats in Bo, in Kenema, in Kailaun, in Moyamba, more than the number of votes. They don't have a seat in Bo right now, APC. They don't have a seat in Kenema. They probably have one seat in Moyamba, one in Kailaun, I think. You understand? And SLPP don't have a seat in Bombali. They don't have. So if you reduce the threshold, there's also a chance that these parties can also win.
What level of reduction would guarantee that diverse representation in Parliament?
Fantastic. Ideally, so good question, but remember for local council elections, the threshold is 4.5. So in fact, the ideal across the world is between 1% and 5%. We would have pushed for a 5% threshold, but given how far they have gone, we are pushing for 7% in the hope that that is going to make that inclusion and that national outlook that we want from our parliament.
Would that 7% you're calling for example, would that still be able to give political parties or the parliament the national character that you're calling for? I'm asking because you go back to the 2018 polls, the elections. Even at the national level, when results were announced for political parties at the national level, you hardly get a political party outside the traditional parties with even a 1%. Yeah. So how are we going to get that 7% at the district level for political parties?
Good question. So this is, yes, about political parties, but it is also about candidates, individuals. So, and there will be causes. So, and I always give this example. Imagine a person with disabilities said, we have a candidate on the list of the, say, opposition APC, or on the list of the ruling party, or indeed on the list of any other political party, or is running as an independent candidate, because we want our voices to be represented in Parliament. I'm absolutely sure that there are so many people who will support such a cause. And regardless of which party or group that person is contesting. So the thing about reducing the threshold is that it also empowers people to run based on causes rather than just on party. For example, if I'm for, I was going to give an example that, so let's say I'm for, so what is it, water or some social services.
Right.
Something that we can all connect to. And I'm running, and I say, this is my platform. If you believe in this, vote for me. And I run a good campaign. I'm pretty sure some people will leave their traditional political parties and support. So, but it is less likely for you to win if the threshold is really 11.9%. It's not going to happen. I agree. NGC, even at their best, got a national vote of what, 7%, 6%, understand? I think C4C. So it's a problem at the national level, but if you reduce it to district level, you're more likely to get that threshold.
Based on their strongholds.
Exactly. 7% instead of 11%. That is, if you go to Bo, obviously for Bo district, if you reduce the threshold to 7%, you check the numbers. All the APC candidates who contested in 2018, put together, they put at least 7% of the votes, or perhaps even more. You understand? That's the point I'm making. Yet we wasted all of those votes. Imagine if you are an SLP supporter in McKinney or AP supporter in Bo, and you're shouting, you're donning your party uniforms, you're singing, and after the elections, you don't have a single member of parliament representing you. It's frustrating. It is.
Now, in the studio, we've also been joined by Fatoma Fambunde, who's the Director of Legal Affairs, Electoral Commission, Sierra Leone. Good morning, and thank you for joining us.
Good morning, and thank you very much.
I suppose you follow this call now, the sort of like a negotiation, so to speak, for lack of a better word, to get the ECSL to reconsider the threshold. But we'll not start from the beginning. Let's head straight to the middle. You're the Legal Affairs Advisor. Legally, is there a possibility currently where we stand for the ECSL to bring down the threshold?
No, we've crossed that bridge. It's now the law, and it's now in existence. We cannot go again to reinvent the wheel. This negotiation maybe could have come earlier, because the regulation that provides for the threshold has gone through Parliament. It has been approved. It's now in existence. So we cannot go again and reinvent that wheel.
Can it not be reviewed?
At this point we are, We are thinking also of period of parliament closing. And then you have to take again a regulation to parliament. You have the provision of 21 days that it's required to be laid in parliament for maturity.
So the election itself is June 24th.
Yes.
Putting this now as a case of an emergency that requires, particularly in the well of parliament, forget the presidency, particularly in the well of parliament, to ensure, as he beautifully put it, you know, the diverse representation in parliament. What would be the emergency solution to this? In other words, what would it take to get back to review the threshold?
What the Electoral Commission did in all of this is to consult with stakeholders in the electoral process. And then at the end of our consultation, we ended up finding a threshold that had to work with formula. We did not just sit down.
Which formula?
Good. We're going to have a 135 seats in parliament for the 2023 elections. And we're having 16 electoral districts in Sierra Leone. So what the commission did was to divide that 135 by 16. And then the quotient that we'll get is 11.85. So we rounded it up to 1 decimal place, and that gave us 11.9.
In this case, clearly, as the civil society is bringing now to the attention of the public, it's still going to defeat the entire purpose of a PR system, which is there to bring more representation in the well of parliament. With that being said, it comes back to why not, now that we've understood the challenges ahead of defeating the entire purpose, why not review when the election itself has not even taken place? It's not like we've voted already and, okay, it's beyond redemption. Why not review based on the necessity presented?
Mark, the purpose of representation with our PR system and the particular PR system that we're using, which is a party list PR system, the commission is of the view that we don't need to have dominated political party as we used to have. For example, in the Southeast, it is no secret that the SLPP almost take all of the seats.
But that's exactly the point they're raising.
Yes.
With the current threshold, that's exactly what we're going to land into.
No, we will not land into that.
How so?
What we'll end up having is that we'll not have one political party dominating and having all of the seats in one particular region. If we go back to memory lane, the 2018 elections provides that the APC had over 10% seats or 10% or 20% votes in the Southeast when it is aggregated. But then you cannot find that in the result because we are having just the simple majority and then the winner taking all. In this context that we'll be having, and then the competition that the election will be bringing, is a situation where the SLPP will not take all of the votes in the Southeast, the APC will not take all of the votes in the Northwest.
And where does this leave the other political parties? They hate to be called smaller political parties, but
we don't call them smaller political parties.
But where would this leave them?
Well, it determines their level of competitiveness with the others. We're not eyeing one political party. I'm just bringing an example of what was the reason behind the PR system that we brought. All right, in 2002, we had a PR system that moved across the board, and we were having a 12.5% threshold. And then if we have an 11.9% threshold, I think we are still on the point of improving. We had 8 seats across the board in 2002, but the threshold was really 12.5.
Fatoma, let me ask this question. You talk about how the reason behind the reintroduction of the PR system is to have, an inclusive parliament, which Tommy describes as a parliament with national character. And you talk about the APC getting about between 10 and 20% in the Southeast in 2018. But this particular point in time, we're not going to take the whole country as a district. We'll be taking district by district. So that 10 or 20% would not be possible for the APC to just get in Kenema district to secure a seat. Would not be possible to get in Kono for a seat. So it means no seat will be secured at all by the APC in the south. It's by district, not as a region, which definitely you will not be taken into cognizance, correct?
No. The beauty about the PR that we'll be having is we're looking at the population quota per district.
Right.
And those population quotas provide the seat allocations. And the seat that we'll be having, we're going to use the existing seats, which means the 2018 seats.
Yeah.
Then we add to the 2023 or 2021 census result that we have. And then we take an aggregate, then the quotient of it. So for example, if you take Kailaun district, it used to have 10 seats in 2018.
Right.
It will be having 10 seats in 2023. The aggregate of it is 20, and then when we take the average, we get 10. So a situation of that, we expect that in the context, whatever comes out of the result from the polls will not be a situation of eyeing just one political party.
No, what I'm asking,
across
what
the
I'm
board,
asking is
no,
this.
I
For
understand
example,
your
no,
point.
quickly permits me. What I'm asking, for example, would the APC secure 11.9% in Kailaun, in Kenema, so that they are able to secure seats in those districts?
I am confident on that. The APC had their stronghold representation in Kailaun district. When you go to Kisitonge, Kisiten, Kisikama, these are places that APC ended up having seat there.
Based on the constituency.
Constituency levels,
based and
yes,
just one seat.
yes. And then what we are now saying is we are taking an aggregation of what APC may end up pulling at district level. We are not looking at constituencies any longer.
Right.
So if they had seats when it was just first past the post and the number was very high, if you aggregate it per district, they are sure of having a seat in Kailaun. They are sure of having a seat.
Just quickly, also you mentioned earlier, before we bring in Tommy again, you mentioned earlier that looking at the SPR system, it's based on the party list.
Yes.
So, and there has always been concerns around independent candidates coming into the mix. Have you been able to devise a model how you're going to factor them into this entire process? 11.9% for an independent candidate to, pull up in a district and get a seat. Is that possible?
Independent candidates are treated like political parties. And the model we are talking about for independent candidates,
Right.
you consider them as you consider political parties at district level. In South Africa, for example, the law never provided for an independent candidate. But then because of the essence of not leaving behind persons who may not be interested in political parties' ideologies, the law provided from the Supreme Court that they should add independent candidates to the context.
Right.
But it was at district level. You will never consider, if an independent candidate chooses to move away from the political parties and stand on their own, it's on the proviso that they are popular enough to pull the required
In their
votes.
constituencies, not in their
No,
districts.
this one is at district level.
When we've seen over time, even currently in the current parliament, members moved away from political parties because they felt they were not treated fairly. They deserved the symbols, but the symbols were not awarded to them. So they moved because they realized that at their different constituencies, they were the choice of the people based on what they've done. And so when they moved, we saw many of them, they are in parliament currently.
I agree.
But at a district level, would I be that popular in Freetown as a district to get 11.9%
we should wait.
But I will tell you at constituency 000 where I reside, I'm that popular, and I'm sure if I contest as an independent candidate, I would win that vote. So how does it work?
If you're sure that the people are really accepting your idea, that you're selling to them, you need not think about constituency level. We have passed that bridge about constituency level. What we are saying is the independent candidate is given the leeway or the leverage to contest like political parties at district level.
11.9%.
Yes,
But
they
not
can.
properly protected for victory.
No,
It's
but they
one thing
are.
to be given a platform or an opportunity to come and compete. It's another thing to make the playing field leveled in a way where you have a chance at winning. These are two different things.
What you're saying is independent candidates need to be given preferential arrangement. For independent candidates, even when you go to countries... Not
necessarily.
Well, it
comes back to the call they're making for the reduction of the threshold.
Let me come. In Liberia, you have provision for independent candidates for presidential elections. All right? They have not made any special arrangement because they are independent candidates. You treat them like political party candidates.
Because they're going in to represent the country. And not
yes, but they are independent candidates. At district level, they are going in equally to represent their district. So the same formula.
So let's take it back to let's quite an interesting conversation. Is this call about protecting independent candidates?
No, it's not. It's not. I mean, I think
and I have not heard any independent candidates saying.
No. I think you guys have made the point so brilliantly that, and I'm sorry, but I disagree with you. Nobody has called for preferential treatment for independent candidates. What they are saying and what we are saying is, it's clear, isn't it, that at this threshold, it's going to be. By the way, the PR system for independent candidates, it's going to be really, really cost intensive because what that means, you'll have to campaign across this district. Think of Western Urban or Western Rural, for example. It's cost intensive. And it is cost intensive, and the threshold is basically, I mean, shooting off the roof. You're making it almost impossible. You are saying to them, forget it. But again, back to the question, this is not about...
And that has seen us now seeing people who contested as independent candidates before, now declaring for political parties.
Of course, you know it's almost impossible for you to pull 11.9% of the votes. But yes, it's a good point to make for independent candidates, but it's not just about independent candidates. It is about the fact that it's such a high threshold that we will not have a diverse and inclusive parliament, at least not the sort of character that we had pushed for. So if you don't mind me coming back to his earlier point that we've crossed that bridge, we will never ever cross a bridge for reviewing a law. And I'm glad you said that Parliament will be in session until the end of April. And we just need 21 days. If there is consensus on all sides, there's nothing. And my intel is that your commission is even planning on tabling a set of regulations in respect of another thing that I'm not going to talk about. So you know there's time for lawmaking. You know you are planning on taking a set of regulations to Parliament. You know, when you say that, and a week or so later, people hear you say, oh, we've introduced this in Parliament to do this, and you now come here and say there is no time for a review of the regulations. That's the problem. I think what we need to talk about is, what's the relevance of this call? Does it help our democracy? Does it promote inclusion? Does it ensure diversity? Does it make it easier for political parties across the board to, increase their, sort of level of representation across the streets? And so, if all of those answers or questions are answered in the affirmative, then you say, what can we do? Let's talk about it. Let's build consensus around this and make sure that we do it. But to sit there to say we've crossed that bridge, you can't get back to it, for me, it's like you just shutting the door. And I don't think it's cool to shut the door when you haven't even had a conversation about how do we do it. For example, the formula. You talked about the formula. Who says we cannot review that formula? Why not do the formula based on district population or even the voter registration? There's a lot we can talk about this. I agree with you, though, Fatoma, that maybe this call should have been made much earlier, but that doesn't defeat the relevance of the call, and it doesn't suggest that we cannot do it. To say that we cannot do it, it means you have no intention of listening to other compelling arguments in respect of this. Don't shut the door. And
he's also saying that in 2002, the threshold was higher, 12 point something, and this one is much lower. But then it still had diverse representation. How does it differ now to 2002?
No, I have to. It wasn't the same. It wasn't the same system. It wasn't the same. The formula was perhaps different. The number of seats in parliament was different. They were different. I mean, I don't have time to look into dynamics, but clearly, what this is going to do for us. I mean, over time, we know that the country has gotten the division in terms of the political blocks, right, has deepened, right? The southeast, the northwest, and there is no way, Fatuma, I heard you say, let's wait until the end of the process. Listen, I guarantee that with this threshold, there is no way AP is gonna get more than a seat in the whole of the eastern, I mean, in Kenema, for example, in Bo, for example, in Moyamba, in Pujan, SLP can see the same. So let's reduce the threshold and even help the traditional parties to basically mix, if you like, their representatives, but more importantly, get minority interests represented, get non-traditional political parties to, give them a fair shot at winning a seat or seats in this election. But the way it is right now, it's going to benefit only the traditional parties in terms of winning most of the votes, but they won't have any really good representation from across
So let me ask this question. One of the fundamental pillars, according to advocates for democracy, is inclusivity, inclusion. With this particular threshold now, we've seen already smaller political parties
or non-traditional
non-traditional political parties have already raised concerns. Some of them are in troubles already with PPRC for not even conducting lower level elections because at constituency level, because they feel like they do not have that power to even go at that level. So if we're putting all of this into context, how would the reduction of the threshold to get parliament as a national character consolidates the nation's democracy?
Absolutely, it's one of the points. So you participate because just generally in life, we're happy when we are hopeful.
Right.
You come to work every day, you expect to be paid at the end of the day. Hope. People who gamble, like Mercury, right? They bet. You know why people bet? It gives them hope, right? That they will win something and it will transform their station, their economic station. That's why if you are going to participate in an electoral process, when you clearly know that the odds are stacked against you, that you have such slim or perhaps non-existent chance of winning, what's the point of participation? So it's definitely going to discourage participation, especially on the part of non-traditional parties, independent candidates, but even the major parties. Do you think, I mean, how much money do you need to pour in a place like McKinney if you are an SLPP to win seats, or in Bo, or in Kenema if you are APC to win more than a seat or win 2 or 3 seats? Let's make this as inclusive, as diverse, and make sure that everyone who is good. I mean, listen, when I was arguing for the PR system, I was very clear in terms of why I wanted it.
Right.
We've got to think about crafting it. Again, we don't have all the time in this world to recraft it, but going forward, if this is going to be the system for the future, there's a lot of recrafting to do. Because the one thing that PR system does is you shouldn't waste votes. I mean, how do you explain to me that I get 10% of the seats in a district and I don't get represented in parliament?
And he's saying now...
No, you're missing the point, Mr. Tommy. We have different types of PR systems.
I know that.
All right?
Yeah.
So if you say you get 10% of the vote and then you're not getting representation, it depends to the type of PR system that you are looking at.
No, sorry.
The PR system that we have that is in existence now has to do with a political parties list. All right.
As you said, it appears you do not consider.
So Fatuma,
a political parties list of PR system that deals with a closed system is different from an open system. It's different from a mixed system. What we have is a closed political parties list system, and using that, we obviously will have to have political parties that do not reach the threshold that have to be eliminated.
I mean, this is
And when you
It was
say
an open.
I mean, with respect,
Hold on.
that's
let's just please give him a minute to land. Yes, go on, sorry.
If you were dealing with an open list system, then you don't have a threshold peg on it. You determine it based on the population threshold at district level and what political parties get. Then you calculate. But what we have in existence is a closed list. And this one will not provide and is eliminating. These were invented for Parliament to determine. And political parties were not left in all of these discussions. So for me, it triggers another form of consideration on the part of Mr. Tommy, that whilst we were doing this, where was he?
Then, Fatoma, it triggers another thought for independent candidates now, as you put your submission to think, where are we with the PR system?
Has any independent candidate that you're presuming will stand as independent candidate given a podium to say that we are not comfortable with this, and therefore we are going this way, or has any smaller political party?
Aside from listening to those independent candidates now, or aside from the fact that we have a couple of them who have now formed alliances with political parties, was still concerned about what we're genuinely concerned about, whether or not they step forward and say it. Because again, based on your submission, the conversation is more about political parties, political parties, political parties. And somewhere along your submission, you're also mentioning eliminating smaller political parties. So it comes back to how
I didn't say eliminating smaller political parties. We don't have smaller political parties, by the way. From the votes you get, the elimination starts without you reaching the threshold. It is not eliminating smaller political parties.
So it comes back to what he's saying. If you
bigger
put
political
10%
parties can
if you
also
get 10% of the votes, then you don't have a representation. That's because the threshold is at 11.
Yes.
Not at 10.
Yes.
So how do you then disagree with what he's saying? So even if you secure 10%, it still doesn't meet the threshold of 11 point something.
It doesn't, but it is not saying it is not inclusive.
But does that not confirm his submission that you can get 10% and still not get a seat?
No, I am not against his submission.
But you said I was missing the
10%. No, I am not against his submission of the 10%. I am against the submission of us having a very high threshold and it's not inclusive. That's my
So it's the
point.
threshold here that determines the inclusivity of the whole voting. But
diversity of representation.
Tommy, just before we lose this quickly, the beautiful opportunity we have this morning is that you're also a legal mind.
Indeed.
What would it take for the ECSL to get back to a point where the threshold is renegotiated and is brought down? What would it take legally? This is now we're picking into your brain as a legal person.
He's also a lawyer, by the way. Remember moments ago I talked about a lot of recrafting needs to be done. So your question about where Abraham Tomo was is really moot because when you were putting this threshold thing, there wasn't diverse consultation. I think your stakeholders in your world, electoral stakeholders are mostly political parties.
No, civil societies are also part of this.
And by the way, some political, we had, for example, a Unity Party complaining in the school here, raising those concerns.
I was on Epic Radio yesterday. A guy, someone who's going to run as an independent candidate was complaining. So don't even ask. They don't even have to complain, like Fabian said. We just know what it's going to produce. It's not going to produce a diverse, inclusive and inclusionary parliament. That's the point we're making.
And whereas Fatoma is not saying it's impossible, he's also making, probably not willfully, but making us think that it is impossible to bring it down. So what's the possibility of doing that before June 24?
Clearly, if there is some intention, some willingness on the part of the ECSL, what they could do is to work with the PPRC, convene a meeting of political parties, electoral stakeholders, including civil society. Let's come. It doesn't have to be even 2 days. 1 day, discuss it, come up with ideas. It's just a matter of amending. It's not like you're writing a whole piece of legislation. You amend that, you review the formula. I mean, if you put a group of statisticians in this room to produce 135 seats with a lower threshold, they'll come up with a formula for you. It's not like it's not doable. And then you take the amended set of regulations to Parliament. As long as there's no objection, all of what I'm talking can be done within a week, and you have the whole of April, right? You get it done. It's simple. He knows, as I said, there is a plan to take a set of regulations to Parliament between now and next week or even later. He knows that. So it's not like we're out of time, so out of time that we cannot do that. If it is mathematically or statistically possible to do that. So it's a thinking part that we should do, and hopefully get the CSL committed to it and lobby Parliament. You understand? I mean, we understand the hurdles. We understand it's difficult, but it's doable, and we should all be willing to embrace the call. That's what I think. But quickly, there are two other calls that we're making as part of this. We're saying the 30% representation that we want for women in Parliament, the way the Public Elections Act 2022 is drafted, that law, if it is not reviewed, it may not produce 30% women's representation in Parliament, because all it asks is make sure there is, out of every three
candidates
names, there has to be a female candidate. So you will have some districts like Kwenadugu, Falaba, where I don't know how many seats. 4.
Yeah, Kwenadugu has 4.
4, yeah. Falaba the same. So imagine if you have 1, 2, the third is a woman. Good chance that that woman may not even get elected from that political party, or there may be just one man. So at the end of the day, we may produce a parliament that doesn't have 30% women's representation, which is why we are proposing that the law be tweaked, which is why I don't like Fatuma's point that was across that bridge. We should always have, no matter how far you have gone on the wrong road, do not hesitate to turn back.
So how do we secure women's 30%?
We want them to be the first of every 3 candidates, right? Instead of 1, 2 men and the third is a woman, the first is a woman, second, third are men. That way, you can be sure to produce at least 30%, perhaps maybe 40%. You see, this is the thing I say to my male folk. We have a chance to make history. We're moving from a parliament with what, 11, 12% women's representation. What's wrong to make it 40%? Does it always have to be men in parliament dominating parliament? What's the point? What's the problem with us men? Man, you have so many things to do outside parliament. Don't make this your own preserve. Tweak the law, make sure that you have at least 45%. Right there, you've made history. You're known for doing the right thing, that's been progressive, that's been transformational. You know, we like doing small things in this country. We always challenge ourselves to think big and act big, but we're doing small things without making name. Imagine you produce a parliament in 2023 that says, oh, Sierra Leone, 50% women in parliament. Man, that's history right there. You get all the global awards and recognition. But it's really frustrating, to be honest. We've talked about women for the last 20, 30 years. And in 2023, we're still having a law that potentially will produce a parliament that doesn't give us 30%. We have to rethink that. And finally, political parties must also make sure that before they produce that list, let them have some kind of participatory democratic process. You know, we saw the APC before their national delegates conference, right? They did what? Ward level, constituency level, district level, regional level, national level. Fantastic. Progress, victory for democracy. Why don't you do the same before coming up with a party list that we're talking about? Because if you're going to leave it to just party executives to sit in their room and determine who's going to be on that list, it's bad for democracy, but most importantly for them, it may even cause disaffection. It's easy. Voter party may creep in. People just say, let them try it, and then they'll go get their own MP, then let them go vote for them. That's what is going to happen. So we urge them to also get a system in place to ensure that a democratic outcome is achieved.
we're wrapping up the conversation. Fatoma, back to you. In summary, how do we leave this conversation? How do we proceed from here, especially considering their call?
Beautiful. Mr. Tommy made mention of female representation. And I think the Electoral Commission needs to be given a tap. We have come a long way with this. Our initial thought was to have a reserved seat for women in Parliament, which was in the bill. The nomination of every 3, there should be or there shall be a female, was just the plan B of it. Both were tendered or tabled in Parliament. We only succeeded with 58 of that provision, which provides 58(2), that of every 3, there shall be a female. The positioning was not taken into consideration because we hadn't wanted it to become too much of an affirmative action, posing it on the people of Sierra Leone. We only provided the space that women need to be represented. And then you have 58(7) of the same provision that is saying, in a situation where the list is provided and does not honor 58(2), the Electoral Commission shall reject that list. So the issue here of us not having 30% maybe, in our thinking, will get up to 33%.
Yeah, he's saying it's based on the positioning of the names on the list.
Yes, but the positioning here does not put any special lens on the first, the second, or the third. It is now left with the political party. And I think these discussions...
And that's what he's saying, that
yes,
you should make it mandatory as to the positioning of the names on the list.
At times, he knows when you're making laws, you leave the leverage. Because tomorrow, we may have to come back to revisit this law. So what we did is to leave it open. You have regulations that may come in. You will have procedures that will come in. But political parties also need to have the decision to make with regard to the ranking. So such discussions, I think, that political parties can also be rallied around, that they could now provide a provision for the positioning of their female candidate. But whatever the circumstances and the argument he is putting, so for example, he cited Falaba. Falaba is 4 seats, all right? The first, the second, the third, any of those 3 would be occupied by a female candidate. The fourth, the Electoral Commission is not with the decision of pegging it that it should be a female. But political parties, if they want to bring in the female representation that we are all yearning for, they can make a regulation on their own part.
So but the ECSL is saying it's left now with the political parties to demonstrate their own commitment for female representation.
I agree. Yes, but if you could allow me...
Continue, just trying to wrap
Sierra Leone, the female representation we had in 2018 is about, I think, 17 or 15 of them. All right.
12%?
12%. When you take it in percentage, it's about 12%. What we did, and I think that is where the Electoral Commission needs to be commended, at a time when the Gender Empowerment Bill was still in Parliament and have not seen the light of day, the Electoral Commission decided that we should have a provision that will provide for female representation. And at our own estimation, with the calculations we have, is whatever the difficult situations or circumstances may be, female representation will be at least 30%. The ceiling that we are looking at is they could have even up to 33%, because there is a provision that is mandatory that political parties need to look at. And if that provision is not honored by them, they will not go through nomination with their list.
What is the provision saying?
And that is saying that you ensure that every 3 you have 1 female candidate. So if you talk about Falaba, you talk about Cambia, you talk about the others where you will not be having 6,
All right.
then the argument here is political parties also have the onus, because it's a national institution they establish.
Okay.
They have the onus to also bring along female candidates and their representation to increase.
Absolutely, I agree with you. Political parties have a role, they have a responsibility to ensure increased women's representation. And by the way, I agree, that was really proactive of the Commission to have made that Section 15 provision. No doubt about that. You guys deserve commendation, and we're not saying you have done a bad job. We're only saying we can make it better. Let's perfect it. Now, leave the PEA 2022 for a moment, the Public Elections Act 2022 for a moment. Let's talk about the Jewish law. It is that law that says Parliament must have at least 30% representation of women in Parliament, right? So we're just saying, let's make sure that we give effect to that law. You have said that by your own estimation, we will produce a parliament of at least 30% women, perhaps even 33%. Now, that's a profound statement, and we'll hold it down to it. But here's the thing. Say Falaba, for example. You know the way it works? Let's say APC, 2 men, and the third person in the list is a woman. SFP, 2 men, the third person. And say APC gets 11, whatever. The first highest, second highest, and the third highest SFP, fourth highest SFP. So you'll have 4 men. Before they get to the third woman or the third candidate on the list,
the seats are taken.
The 4 men have taken the seats.
So how about if you reinvent it the other way, that the first position is a female?
Yes.
And then on the other political party, the first position is a female.
Exactly, that's what we're looking
No,
for.
So as we wrap up, gentlemen, Tommy,
That's what the political party should do.
Tommy,
So this is not for. By the way, this is not targeting ECSM. by the way.
I know,
This
but we're sending now. It's a
Ibrahim
crusade
Tommy,
we're sending now.
Exactly.
gentlemen, as we wrap up, because we wouldn't want to be selfish, we need to let you both go.
Indeed.
As we wrap up, Fatoma is saying not just the ECSL, this should also be a follow-up with the political parties, so they demonstrate their own willingness and commitment for female representation in Parliament.
Absolutely.
But with all the call you're making, aside from the conversation we're having now, engaging the media, where do you end this conversation to ensure that your call becomes a reflection of the June 24 elections?
Absolutely. So we have a plan, and part of that plan is a media strategy. We would have to do in-person engagements. Actually, we've started those conversations virtually, and we're planning to meet all of these actors. And I can't leave this place without making this very clear. This is nothing against the ECSL.
No.
This campaign goes... Of course, you're going to be a critical part of it, but this campaign goes way beyond the ECSL to include the political parties, to include law officers department, to include members of parliament, because they will have to pass it in the first place, to include political parties. So it's not about the ECSL hasn't put in any foot wrong as far as the point about positioning of women is concerned. The target is more, we target more mostly political parties and, of course, members of parliament. But we think it is doable. We think if there is a groundswell of support for this and all the actors, critical actors, are willing to do this, we will deliver it. And so when we have a parliament of 40% women, we will say we've made history. Because we live to make history. That's the point.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Fatoma. You guys have done a good job. We hope that you can change your position and understand that we have, we can do this and for our people and for democracy.
And we'll also follow up the conversation and see how far that call goes and what impact it would make in the upcoming June 24.
I think, Phoebe, maybe before we go, we have to start somewhere. And we cannot bite more than we will chew. Where we have started with female representation is a very good kick-off for a nation. And we'll build on it. The Electoral Commission never had a law that provided stricto sensu for female representation. But here we are today with 2022, having a nomination provision that is paying attention or putting the lens on female representation. After 2023 elections, there is always the room for review of laws. We have political parties, we have elections observation missions reports, and other stakeholders report, for which all of these will also come to the fore. And we'll kick off from that point and improve. But if we're saying now we need 40%, we never had 1% as a law.
Gentlemen, for the purpose of time, for today's conversation, we would have to pull the plug on the conversation this morning. But we thank you for your time to be a part of the conversation this morning.